Hello, thank you for joining us in the Greening Government webinar speaker series. My name is Ted Ritzer, and I'm joined by fellow panelist Wendy Oppers, and our guest speaker for today is John Richardson. He is the CEO of Ethelo. And John, it was kind of funny because I found out about you when I attended a speaker series here in Edmonton, and the presenters were actually Molly Harrington with the BC government and Al Edmansky. And when I chatted with Al about sort of what I was considering in terms of doing this speaking series, he says, "Well, you gotta talk to John Richardson and your company Ethelo about how to sort of engage citizens at internet scale and for a digital citizen engagement." And thanks to Al Edmansky for that suggestion. And thank you, John, for taking the time to present in the Greening Government speaker series. And with that, I'll turn it over to the main event, John Richardson from Ethelo. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ted. And it's nice to know that Al is the connection. I've known Al for many years, and he's a great supporter. So I'm very pleased to introduce Ethelo. And essentially, Ethelo is a cloud-based platform that organizations can use when they want to engage groups around solving difficult and sometimes contentious problems and making clear and transparent decisions around that. And so companies kind of byline at the moment is collective wisdom and decisive results, because it's really aimed at aggregating that collective wisdom of the crowd and landing on really clear and actionable outcomes. We actually began as a nonprofit organization in 2012 around this vision that the way government works, particularly around engaging citizens, could be improved. It seems like we have systems of public engagement. You know, our voting system is very periodic, and sometimes it doesn't really reflect kind of where the population is going, or deep insight into sentiment. So we want to look at can internet technology provide new ways of advancing democracy, and looking not just at how things are being done right now, but how could the internet support better forms of democracy in 10 years or 15 years. And as a part of some of the engagements that we did for the nonprofit, we did a number of pilot projects and some technology demonstrations. We developed some technology on our own, particularly around decision making and problem solving. And so we were kind of faced with a challenge. Well, we're a nonprofit organization. We have this technology. We want to scale it and build it. So we turned and developed a for-profit company, a technology company, which is now called Ethelo Decisions. And the idea here is the company's responsibility is to build out this technology and provide it to public and private sector. And the nonprofit also continues to exist. And its mission is to take that technology and help organizations and government respond and engage the population more effectively and respond more agilely. So we have these two organizations. So I am now the CEO of the technology company, which is Ethelo Decisions. And I have a background in social change, social entrepreneurship. I started an organization called Pivot Legal Society a number of years ago here in British Columbia. And before that, I'd worked for EcoJustice, which is a strategic litigation firm for the environment. And kind of as a part of all this, I became an Ashoka Fellow, which is actually how I met Al Edmansky, who is also an Ashoka Fellow. It's this foundation that supports social entrepreneurs. And my kind of partner in crime is Manu Kabihizi. And Manu is the head of our nonprofit. He took over about a year and a bit ago. And his background is also social engagement, but kind of on a more governmental level. He's worked with UNICEF and the UN. There's a large democratic engagement organization called the National Democratic Institute, and also a number of internet-based movement organizations, such as Purpose and Avaz and Move On. There's a number of these organizations in the US and Canada. So together, we're taking this kind of private-public partnership idea and using Ethelo as the ground to try and promote new approaches to group decision making. And there's lots of different kinds of problems with group decision making, and environmental issues pose lots of specific problems. So in environmental issues, stakeholders are often divided, which makes it difficult to implement any kind of decision because there's always left some pockets of resistance in the group. It's hard to get a sense of where people are coming from because loud voices can often dominate and have unfair influence on the process. Data collection, whatever methodology you're going to use, whether it's focus groups or like town halls, it can be very expensive and time consuming. And even if you go kind of a low-cost route with surveys, still you have to analyze all that data. And how do you arrive at clear decisions with so much information coming in when what is important at the end of the day is having decisions that people can support. And all these challenges notwithstanding, still decisions have to be made. These environmental challenges are not going away. So we kind of thought a lot about ethos, thinking about what is the problems with decision making. And the traditional process is a decision maker, will have a group. They're going to ask them some questions, whatever format they use, whether it's a town hall or a survey. They gather that information together. And then there's kind of this black box process where the decision maker, maybe a small group, will sit down, analyze the information. They apply their criteria, they think about the constraints, they try and understand what the population is wanting. A lot of extrapolation and, frankly, gut instinct happens in that stage. And then a decision emerges, and they go out to the general public with that decision. And now the work is not done because now they have to explain that decision, persuade people that it's the right decision, influence events, and with sometimes weak results, sometimes very bad results. There's definitely have been a lot of disasters in decision makers not understanding fully where populations are coming from, specifically with large projects that have environmental implications. And even when they arguably land on the right decision, if people don't see how that decision was arrived at or didn't feel that their voice was heard, there can still be resistance to the outcome. So there's a challenge in how we make decisions, particularly with large groups. So Ethos approach is kind of a paradigm shift around group engagement, and it centers around the technology and engaging groups at all stages of the process. So in stage one, we might define the problem and imagine solutions. Ethelo acts as kind of a online environment for this to happen. People can make suggestions, propose ideas, talk about things. Kind of an ideation can happen online with people exchanging ideas. But then it moves into a second stage, which is a problem-solving stage. And here, people collaborate together in applying those constraints, using criteria to sort through what would quite be a very large number of potential scenarios, and also doing trade-offs, because a key part of the heart of any decision is that you can't have everything. And when decision makers take that difficult decision upon themselves and other people are not engaged in those difficult trade-offs, people wonder how they got there. But Ethelo allows people to collaborate in doing those trade-offs and watch each other. And in a way, Ethelo is kind of like a game. Each person goes through this process of solving the problem themselves. But in community, they can talk with other people and trade ideas, but each person is solving that idea, that problem themselves. And then Ethelo takes all of those inputs from different people across the group and identifies actionable decisions in a very transparent way. So everyone can see the results that are being generated dynamically. They're updated regularly. And it can be an iterative process. So they can go on around it, add more ideas, and keep on problem solving. And this process can take 2 weeks or 2 months. And as the process continues, the answers get more refined and more polished and reflect the deeper insight of the group. And at that point, when you've gone through a process like that, implementation is the easy part, because people have been watching these decisions emerge, they've been discussing them, debating them, and there's a broad base of shared knowledge and support. And Ethelo clearly identifies the level of support behind these different decisions. So it's easy to move from there into implementing a strong decision that will not only tap into the wisdom of the group, but also receive the support of the group. So Ethelo has been used for a number of different kind of complex, constrained problems. So accelerating policy development, improving community planning, broadening CSR evaluations, helping organizations align staff with vision and strategy, helping organizations go through change, sometimes a shift in management, and also improving project designs. And this can be small projects or very large infrastructure projects. Some of our clients include the Government of Canada, Van City Credit Union, which has about, you think it's a financial institution, but actually they have about 600,000 members, and it's part of their mission to engage those members in strategy setting. We've worked with the Capital Regional District, so in BC, that's the capital area. We've worked with small municipalities like the town of Gibsons, elected politicians, and TELUS is also using Ethelo to do CSR analysis. And we've also engaged with nonprofit organizations that are in turn engaging large groups in kind of online policy decision making. And it's got some good reviews, and I won't dwell on the slide, but Government Canada is quite happy with it, and we've got strong reviews from a number of our clients as well that have used it in quite a variety of different type of use cases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you all through a use of Ethelo, so you can see how it applies in different scenarios, because I think that it really has to be seen to understand how it works. So I'll spend a bit of time here, the next 15 to 20 minutes. So I'll go through 2 different demonstrations of Ethelo so you can see the functionality, and then we'll spend the last 20 minutes. I'll take questions, and you can ask me anything you like. So this first demonstration is about the development of a waste management treatment plant. And the demonstration that you see right here has not been used in a live setting, but it was used as the basis for our engagement with the Capital Regional District, who is currently revisioning their waste treatment philosophy, and they're looking at plans for a new $700 million waste treatment facility there. But so here, this is a demonstration, and here you have a government that needs to build the waste treatment facility, but they have some constraints. They have budgetary constraints. They have constraints on the maximum yearly cost. They want to optimize around some environmental values, so they want to reduce driving time for waste trucks. They want to optimize jobs for the local economy, and they also want to minimize emissions, so keep incineration levels low and manage their GHGs, greenhouse gas emissions. So these are the challenges, and within all these constraints, government wants to build a waste treatment plant and also get public support. So right now, I'm logged in and seeing what a user might see. You know, you might send invitations out to a community, promote it through a website or social media. People would click through and land on this page. They read the introduction, and then they go through this process. First, there might be some questions. You can gather basic survey information to help you understand who's participating. And then people dive in to the issues. So the first main issue might be the location. So, and we're modeling this on a Vancouver type of scenario, but we're looking at a bunch of different potential locations where this waste treatment facility could be located, all with pluses and minuses. So in the main column here, I'm seeing Main Street and Kent Avenue. And as a participant, what I'm being asked to do is evaluate it. Do I oppose it, or am I neutral, or do I support it strongly, or anything in between? I got some basic information about that particular option, and then I can engage with other people kind of in a conversational style, putting my ideas down, giving my feedback. And I do this for each one of the options that are on the table. Can for lands is an option, Nanaimo is an option, export the waste. We can have suggestions by participants. So you see some here. This can actually become quite a whiteboard of ideas. And then lastly, I evaluate how important location is for me as I go through my decision process. And Ethelo takes that information in. how I've evaluated the options, how I weigh the priorities. And as I do that, in the right-hand column, you see my top choice. And what Ethelo has done here is it's looked at how I've scored things, and it has scanned through all the possible scenarios to find one that I would be supportive of. And I've already provided for some information, so it has some data to go on. But not only would I be supportive of it, it's also ensuring that it meets the constraints that the government has set in place. So capital expenditure cap, yearly cost cap, minimum threshold for yearly jobs, incineration targets. So I'm going through and voting on things and optimizing a top choice based in kind of the reality of the decision making. So I do this for each one of the core issues around this decision. Modes of energy recovery. So we have, this is basically the technology question. How are we going to deal with, are we going to do capped incineration? Are we going to do gasification? All of these have implications for emissions, etc. So capped incineration, 100% incineration, again, suggestions, and I indicate my level of priority. And as I vote on these things, each time I change my vote, it goes through on the right-hand side and re-optimizes for me. So making sure that what it's showing me there is going to be my favorite. You see, as I change that to 100, my top choice to 100% gasification, it changed in the right-hand side. Whereas if I change it back, maybe I'm not supportive of gasification, but I really like capped incineration, then it changes that too. So it dynamically updates my top choice as I go through the process. And then we have the third issue, which might be complementary operations. So these are different ancillary projects that could happen alongside the new waste treatment facility that could support its operations or mitigate its effects. So repurposing local social enterprises, there's lots of economic and environmental benefits to that. Biogas capture facilities, diverting and recycling social enterprises, so creating increased funding for those type of organizations. And again, we have the suggestion box so that ideas proposed by people in the public can come forward. And it's important to note here that these suggestions don't exist necessarily separate from the main decision making. I'm logged in as an administrator here, and I can look and say, well, limit garbage collection, that is actually a good idea. And I can go there and I can approve that idea, and it becomes part of the options that people are voting on. And I can assign it capital cost and operational cost, and it becomes part of the larger kind of financial modeling behind this space of possible decisions. So it really is an ideation platform as well as a problem-solving platform. Then I have a last stage, which is my review the vote. So here I get to reanalyze my priorities. I've weighed the different topics and given them different weights. Maybe I want to take another look at that. Really, location is quite important to me. And as I change these things, each time it reanalyzes what my ideal solution is. So here I stop and say, well, this is what each individual does. They go through this process of weighing options, evaluating scenarios, trading information, talking with other people, and finding their particular top choice in kind of a problem-solving exercise. But our larger goal is to find an outcome that people across the group will support. So what Ethelo does is it takes my information, my data, and also all the data points provided by other participants and aggregates them. So that's what's shown on the last page here. So this is the group's top choice, but it's actually analyzed every single possible choice, and it's showing us first the top choice. So we have here a measurement of the strength of the decision. So this is quite a strong decision that's listed here. It's giving me the specific elements of the decision, where it should be located, what should the technology be, how should we spend money around complementary operations. It's given me all the key metrics around that decision. So I can see that it meets my existing decision constraints. And it showed me at the bottom the support distribution. So on the left would be people that are opposed to the decision, in the middle, neutral, and on the right, supportive. So I can see that this has got a nice tight support distribution. People are supportive of it. They're generally similar in their levels of support. There isn't a group that's opposed to it. Actually, there isn't anyone to oppose to it. So as a policymaker, I could say, well, we have done our engagement. I see that this particular solution has a solid level of support, and I could proceed to act on this and know that I have some objective basis, not just in practical reality, but also in public support. But I might even want to look deeper. So this is one possible decision, but there was many. And so we can explore the scenarios. And in this case, there was actually 62 different ways of approaching this problem that would have met my pre-existing decision constraints. And we can scroll through them just in the same way as you search through with a search engine. You can use Ethelo to search decisions, and Ethelo will show them in ranked order. So let's look at the second highest support decision. So here's a slightly different decision, not as much complementary operations, not as quite as strong as support, but still practical. You can still do this. It wouldn't be the top choice, but it's workable, and different financial profile. So, in considering other factors, it may be that this is a better solution. And we can go through these decisions one by one, all the way down to the worst one. So here's scenario rank number 62. So pretty poor ranking. Basically about exporting all of our waste to Washington State. So no one supports it. It's practical, but as a politician, it's pretty impractical. You wouldn't want to go and do this, even though it makes a kind of logical sense, because it's just going to be a world of pain to try and move ahead with something like that. So we'll go back to this top level scenario, and we can go deeper into the analytics as well. So we can look at the details of all the different options here. So some are being selected in this top choice and some are not. We can click on a particular one, right? And sometimes go deeper and looking at them. And then, actually something's not coming up. And kind of do a deeper level of analysis as we go through. And also when we click on the score, we get a little bit of deeper insight into how Ethelo evaluates the different scenarios. And Ethelo takes a two-part approach to measuring the strength of support. It looks at not only what is the average level of support, but also it looks at how evenly is that support distributed. So, for example, you might have two decisions. One is very polarized. You have a strong group of people, 60% of the people really, really love the outcome, 40% really, really hate it. And the average is a mild support when you even it all out. Another decision, another possibility might be, well, people don't feel strongly for it, against, or for. They're all kind of mildly supportive of that decision, but no strong feelings either way. It will be easier to implement decision number 2, because decision number 1 is going to generate a lot of controversy and argument and resistance. It's going to consume a lot of energy because people are so polarized around that decision. Whereas decision number 2, because people are generally supportive of it but not strongly resistant, but even though there isn't huge high levels of support, this is something that you can implement and not anticipate a war is going to erupt if you do that. And this has definitely been the case with some of our engagements where we propose a solution that is actually not even being discussed. But Ethelo proposes it because it's something that's going to get broad support and generate low levels of resistance. So this fairness score measures how much polarization or unanimity is there behind a decision. And the more unanimity, the more similar people are in their support for an option, the greater the fairness weighting increases the strength of the decision. So in this way, Ethelo looks not just at kind of the mathematical aspects, although there is a mathematical aspect to how we calculate fairness, but it looks at group dynamics and the psychology of groups and what does it take to implement a group decision in a way that's going to stick and generate approval and long-term support through the lifetime of a project, because these things have to kind of survive for a long time. So I hope that is clear. And what I'm going to do now, so this, what I just showed you, is Ethelo applied to a government decision. So we're going to build this big project. We want to get public support. We have to meet our constraints. How are we going to do that in a transparent way that makes sense? But that's not always the position of government. Sometimes government is in the position of being an arbiter or a mediator between competing interests. And this is where I'm going to go with the second example here, which is around a permitting scenario. So here, this is a case where a First Nation has been approached by a logging or mining company to develop 4 parcels of land on their property. And as you know, these are contentious discussions even within First Nations, because there are strongly held environmental values around preserving their environmental heritage, but at the same time, many First Nations are struggling with issues around economic development and wanting to create jobs for their communities. So leaders in those positions need to do some kind of balancing, and also need to engage their community in that conversation. So those are some of the constraints around First Nations. They have a complex decision that they're faced with, and businesses are also faced with decisions. Many of them would like to accommodate a lot of these First Nation a lot of these environmental values, but unfortunately, environmental values often create an impact on the bottom line. And the more restoration or etc. that is undertaken as part of a project, the lower the profitability of the project, and sometimes it can actually kill a project. You know, if it's a particularly environmentally sensitive area and restoration is mandated, full restoration, then sometimes it's not even possible. So how can we balance these interests in a way that's transparent and creates maximum support and satisfaction for all the parties? So it's not a small challenge here. So in this particular one, we have developed this is also an example of Ethelo being used in a permitting application where government is being brought in and helping to determine whether it's appropriate to issue a permit in a certain circumstance if the consultation has been undertaken in an appropriate way, and whether all the parties are likely to kind of continue to be supportive of the project. On the business side, and it's not scripted here, but they have some financial objectives. They have minimum profit thresholds, and on the First Nation side, they have some minimum environmental values, but also some hopes around jobs and economic benefits. So here, in this decision, there are 4 topics that participants will go through. And you might imagine representatives from the company going through this process, and also representatives from the First Nation, or even the whole First Nation possibly, but certainly the key decision makers. And on the table are proposed developments or proposed mine sites on 4 different sites. There's a core site, there's a site by a lake, there's a mountainside site, and then there's also a proposed mining site that is located with some old growth. And there are also some things that are not about necessarily sites, but about other goals for the First Nation, which is the employment targets and the environmental targets. So let's go in. The first issue, you might imagine I'm logged in here. I'm participating as a representative of the First Nation, and I'm seeing with this core site, we have 4 mining approaches that are possible. There can be no mining whatsoever. The site is left undeveloped. In that case, there's no jobs, and we have a perfect environmental impact. There's no environmental impact. A second scenario might be proceed with mining, but with a minimal impact, low impact mining. So this one might generate 80 jobs, for example, and we would do some work in advance. The parties would do some work to kind of identify some of these metrics. So it might generate some jobs, some revenue for the First Nation. It would generate some revenue for the company. It would have a minor environmental impact, 8 out of 10. And then there might be a moderate impact mining scenario. More jobs, more revenue for the First Nation, more revenue for the company, but also a deeper environmental impact, harder to restore. And then there might be a high impact mining scenario, where we really just go in and maximize the economic value of the mine. So a large number of jobs might be created, large amount of revenue for the First Nation, and revenue for the company, but at a cost of environmental impact. So here, this one gets a 2 out of 10. And then we can also get some suggestions, always kind of holding that door open for people to propose their own ideas. And those things do and can impact how these kind of larger proposals are framed. There might be ways of mitigating effects or tailoring these different four proposals that makes them more appealing. And finally, I can say, how important is this particular site to me? And maybe this site is not important. Actually, maybe this is a low environmental value site. I wouldn't perhaps put it so important. And what I've done, and by the way, just to say again, I have already gone through and done this survey. So you're seeing in the right-hand column results based on a vote I've already put in. But it's showing in the right-hand column a particular decision. So for each of the 4 sites, it's showing a different mining objective, and it's also showing some achievements that would be met by that particular mining approach. So we hit a certain kind of employment target, we hit a certain kind of environmental target, which is a 5 to 6 out of 10 on the impact scale, and we can see the number of jobs, the number of revenue for the First Nation, and the amount of revenue for the company, and also the net environmental impact. So as I go through this process, I'm essentially in that right-hand column refining what my decision would be around the permit and the employment targets and the environmental targets. So I've moved on to the next page. Now we're on the Lakeside site. This is the second site that was on the table. Potentially productive, but environmentally sensitive. And maybe I would look at this and I would know what is being discussed here, because this is my territory, and there might be some other values associated with the site that are not easily captured. There might be memories, there might be stories, there might be cultural heritage values around the site. All this can factor into my decision making when I go through and evaluate the different options. And it may be that because Lakeside is actually quite important for other reasons, I would support no mining whatsoever on Lakeside Site, or possibly some support for minimal impact mining, moderate impact mining, no, and definitely no high impact mining there. So I can express my values, my sentiments around that site in how I evaluate those different options. And you can see in the right-hand column, it's showing no mining for the Lakeside site now as my top choice. And then we go through the sites. I won't do each one in detail, but now there's a mountainside site. It will have its own characteristics. And by the way, we can have more information here. We can have images of the site. We can have maps. We can have links to PDFs. There can be lots of supplementary information and also lots of discussion. And as is a demo, it doesn't have a lot of discussion, but you can imagine people talking and trading ideas back and forth, and this going on for weeks. Finally, we evaluate the old growth site. Again, possibly an environmentally sensitive site. And then we go into competing values. So in this stage, I'm being asked to evaluate what would I like to see in terms of employment targets. So how important is it for me, for example, to see between 100 and 500 jobs over the next 7 years? Well, now I have to start making some difficult choices. Maybe this is very important to me. It may not be as important as saving the Lakeside site, but still important. How important would 50 to 100 jobs be? Well, still quite important. And I'm never going to be against jobs. So all of these are important. I might have to go back and say, well, all these are important. So jobs are good. More jobs is better than less jobs. Simply that. And also, finally, how important are jobs to me? Might be very important, or it might not be important at all. And then finally, I'm doing an assessment of how important are these environmental values. So how much support or opposition would I have for a net 7 out of 10, 7 to 10 out of 10 impact? Well, so 7 to 10 would be very low impact. Maybe I'd be very supportive of that. Net 5 to 6, less supportive. Maybe I'm just completely against anything that's going to have as much impact as a 3 or 4, and 1 to 2, I'm totally opposed to that. And I might say environmental impacts are quite important. So I've given impact in all these different kind of vectors or parameters of the decision. I have a chance to do a review. So I can go back now, I can look at my top choice in the right-hand column, and I can reevaluate my priorities. So maybe the core site is actually more important than Lakeside or Lakeside Site, or probably it's not. Mountainside Site is not so important. The old growth site is very important, but employment is also very important, and environmental values are very important. So I've kind of evaluated my priorities here. And as I do that, each time I adjust it, Ethelo takes that information and reanalyzes all the possible scenarios to shortlist my top choice. Then, again, this is the conclusion of my role as an individual participant. I communicated and dialogued and problem solved with my other people in my First Nation. I may have also been seeing comments from maybe extra information that would be relevant for my decision making. So we can come together in this exercise around the problem solving. We can see results. So mining interventions on these different sites, we have a different amount of employment target, and we are achieving a certain amount of environmental impact across the group. We can see the amount of jobs and revenue and corporate revenue that's been generated, and we can also see the profile of support across the group. Now, I should stop for a moment and just say an important part of how Ethelo is set up is how influence is distributed. So in this scenario, I think actually, if I recall, we've set this up to be just used by the First Nation. So the corporate representatives would not be participating in this evaluation. But we could set it up so that both groups participated. And we might say, well, in identifying what's a strongly supported outcome, we're going to give the corporation 50% of the influence and the First Nation 50% of the influence, because we want to find an agreement that leaves both sides happy. So you can do both approaches using Ethelo. You can use Ethelo to kind of find an arbitrated solution or a solution that's beneficial to both parties, or you can use it with one party to find out what is a strongly supported solution for them within the constraints identified for the other party. So in that type of scenario, maybe the company said, we're not going to participate in this survey, but we'll just let you know that we need to make $50 million in order to proceed with anything. So then the First Nation can kind of optimize within that constraint and say, well, what balance of jobs and mining, etc., would allow us to achieve our objectives and still have the company generating enough revenue for them to proceed with an initiative. So here we have one. The corporate revenue is 59 million. So if that was the constraint, we could see, okay, well, this particular outcome is going to generate enough revenue for the company to proceed. And also we're generating 210 jobs. We're generating a substantial amount of revenue for the First Nation. And we can see in the very, very bottom in this last graph that it's fairly well supported. So there's not a lot of opposition, and the people that do support it are fairly similar in their levels of support. And then we can also explore all the scenarios. Again, like we did with the last situation, in this case, there's 123 different permitting approaches that are possible. And we can evaluate every one. We can go through and see what's the second highest one, what's the third highest, all the way down to the least strongly supported. So in this way, and this kind of ties back to our tag lighting, we try to tap into or harness the collective wisdom of a group to identify decisive results. So here is what we would say is a decisive result. Here is a very specific decision that could be made that would be broadly supported, that a government or First Nation could proceed with in some kind of confidence, knowing that all the insights and sentiments of the group have been canvassed and an actual outcome has been delivered. So I hope that's a clear overview of how Ethelo works. Again, it's a collaborative problem-solving platform that's aiming at achieving these strongly supported group outcomes. That's been 40 minutes I've spoken. So what I'll do now is I'll turn it over to Ted, and I'll let him kind of host questions, and I'm happy to answer anything that people have.
Well, thanks so much for that presentation, John. I mean, I guess to start off with, for people to be able to sort of pose questions online, if you kind of hover your cursor over the top of the screen, you should find a Q&A button to be able to pose questions.
Great, I see it there.
Yeah, and there's also a chat function as well. I don't see any questions right now, but I guess one of the things that I have encountered that people are concerned with any of the kind of the online citizen engagement is where the data is stored, and that it's not a server in who knows where in the world, John. So I guess put my fellow government workers' minds at ease about the data and their access and the security of it.
Sure. So we've had to be compliant with Canadian regulations around this. We're suppliers for the federal government, for the Capital Regional District, for municipalities. So all of our data is hosted in Canada. It's in a firm in Montreal. So we're regularly tested and secure. So we meet kind of government protocols around management and storage of information.
That's excellent. Now, are there any kind of other sector examples? You've presented, obviously, for our benefit, mostly government examples, John. But from the private sector, have you got any examples?
Well, that's an interesting question. So we don't divide it so much into public-private. We divide it into public-facing and internal. So, for example, with Public Works, we are doing they're using Ethelo on a number of projects, but they're all internal. So they have expert decision makers inside their department that they want to canvass on, for example, major real estate decisions. They have a very structured decision-making process that requires certain criteria to be evaluated, certain weightings to be done, certain considerations to be measured. And Ethelo allows them to kind of go through that staged process in a very kind of rigorous and objective way and identify outcomes, not that the population as a whole will support, but what a group of experts, internal experts with knowledge of the domain would support. And so they're looking at Ethelo, they're using it for that, they're using it for process improvement around procurement processes, so making sure that we're engaging suppliers and helping to understand what is a reasonable RFP, looking at how they can, how are their provision of service, because Public Works, who we're working with, is a service provider to other governments inside, other departments inside the government. How are their services being received? Can they improve their services? So kind of client evaluation processes. So that's government as well, but on the internal side.
Well, that's really interesting, John, because I've got a question here. Can this be used to evaluate several independent decisions rather than an overall single decision?
So putting forward a limited number, for example, of options in front of decision makers and evaluating each one of those, possibly by using some criteria? Yes, I can. Yeah. So Ethelo can be configured in a kind of a very broad variety of ways. So right now we see it building scenarios. We're taking a set of options and it's using combinatorics to build out a set of scenarios. But we could also say, really, there's only 6 scenarios, and we need to evaluate each one in depth, and Ethelo can do that as well.
Oh, that's excellent, John. Another comment that's been posted is, and I'll just read it out, is this is a great tool for tame problems and tough choice and policy making and decisions. Does it work for the wicked problems when those affected in the government of Alberta does not necessarily have the answers or all the perimeters or the desired outcomes defined?
I would like to get a bit more specific about that, but so Ethelo can be an ideation platform. So maybe there's a problem, but we just don't know the answer at this point. We need to even start there. So you can just pose questions, or you can start at an abstract level and talking about values. What are the core values or larger, higher level objectives that we need to look to in starting to zero in on a solution? And what are your suggestions for particular ones? And in that way, you can use Ethelo in a kind of an iterative way. Do a first round, kind of identify some higher level objectives, values, some suggestions, and then do it again. And kind of start to zero in on specific solutions, and also test the waters as you do that. I hope that answers the question.
Well, another one that just sort of sprung to mind when you mentioned on ideation was, I know the mayor of San Francisco had used a firm that's similar to you for the staff with the city of San Francisco to be able to pose questions and gather ideas on specific city priorities. Has your technology been used for that type of purposes, John?
Not by municipality, but we have, for example, worked with Van City. They have a number of strategies that they are specifically around co-ops. They have a number of co-op initiatives that they are, as a credit union, trying to promote inside the community. So they've used Ethelo as kind of an ideation platform, engaging in particular youth in giving ideas, new suggestions for alterations on their initiatives around co-op promotion. So yes, it has been used in that way.
Well, that's excellent. And your comment on youth, of course, leads me to sort of ask from an educational perspective, a Department of Education or a school district, for example.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting you raise that. So we have a collaboration with a nonprofit organization called Me on the Map. And Me on the Map hosts some workshops with elementary school children around how can we work together to design a park. And it starts with children drawing pictures of parks and what they would like to have in a park. But then they do something quite interesting, which is they're trying to find solutions that all groups of children, a large group of children will support, that will also meet some community objectives. And in that part, they use Ethelo as part of the process to assist very young kids finding compromise solutions that will get support of all the group of the children and also meet some of these objectives. And they've done this in Vancouver and other cities in Canada. If you look at Me on the Map, I think that's a really interesting exercise in educating young children, youth, on new ways of doing group decision making on public projects that can be quite controversial.
No, that's excellent, John. That's a fascinating example. I guess we've got a question here, a pretty pragmatic question. How expensive is this tool to use?
Yeah, so it depends on the user. We have nonprofit rates, which are quite affordable, and it goes up to government rates, which are government rates. So we can be as much as, for very, very large groups over a multi-month span and complex decisions, up to $15,000 for license fees, or down to $1,000 for smaller engagements with nonprofit organizations. And I should also note that we have, because I realize that you don't want to jump in necessarily all at once, we have a $500 proof of concept offer out where someone can come to us and say, here's our problem. What can you do about this problem? Show me, right? And then we will sit down and build out Ethelo as a problem-solving solution for that particular problem, and they can test and see, well, could I see this actually working? And if it does, then we can move on to the next stage of the conversation.
Okay, and I guess another question that I'd like to pose, John, given the theme of this whole conference, Greening Government, is reducing carbon footprint of public engagement, I think is at the core of why I wanted to get you to chat with us.
Yeah. Well, certainly there's the reduction in costs of transportation and all the energy consumption that's involved in just getting people to a location. But that falls under a larger umbrella also of just quality of engagement. Not everyone can take 3 hours out of their evening to travel to a town hall and participate. And there's a certain dynamic that can arise out of those style of interactions. You have to be pretty motivated to do that kind of travel to get to the place. And the people that show up for town halls are usually have very strong feelings. And it's difficult to get a sense sometimes from a town hall is this really representative of how everyone feels, or is this just the angry people, right? So Ethelo allows you to engage a much larger group of people that maybe whose opinion is important, but are not so personally motivated maybe by infringement on their personal property or some other thing that makes them just fired up to go out and oppose something. You can have a better sense of where a larger group sits on something, and also engage that problem solving in a broader way.
Well, one of the other things that's of interest to me is there really a digital divide in Canada now? I mean, in your experience, is that something that's an impediment to public participation?
It's very interesting you ask that. So I assume you're talking about an age divide. Is that what you mean?
Well, actually, I was thinking in just terms of access to technology, and I wouldn't propose that it's necessarily age specific, but maybe it is. If you've got any insight on that, John.
Well, it's actually just on that, we did an engagement in the Capital Regional District, and this is public information. So more than half of the people that participated were over 55, but we had an 85% completion rate. So we had a very engaged base of senior citizens, older residents that were very active in the platform, and so the technology did not seem to present any kind of impediment. And I think that's where things are going. Not everyone has a computer, although many people do, but many or most people have mobile devices or smartphones these days, and Ethelo is mobile responsive, so you can use Ethelo on a bus, so it's quite accessible. It's not universal in the sense that there is some technology required, but more and more that technology is available to people.
Well, that's a really interesting point that you made about mobile, because, when you kind of think of the demographic of, whether it's youth or young parents, and they're really, really busy. And I think that actually captures most people are really, really busy. So you have to provide, I believe, platforms that are mobile compatible, because everybody's just going crazy trying to, pay their mortgage.
Yeah. You really have to reach people where they are in those spare moments where they have to give. That's the nature of people's time. Yeah.
Well, that's excellent, John. I mean, I think I've really enjoyed this session. I would pose sort of a last call for questions of the webinar participants. Just give them a few moments to post any last questions. Well, thanks so much, John, for joining us. This is really fascinating. And of course, if anyone wants to, you're only a click and a search engine away. If people search for Ethelo, and you've posted, obviously, there's you see the web address. So I guess in closing, John, thanks so much for this presentation. And we will be posting it to our partner in crime on this series is the Municipal Climate Change Action Center. Okay. And Mark Hewitt at that association has posted and established a YouTube channel where we can post all of the presentations, so folks can visit that. And I guess the last thing I'll say in closing in terms of what's up and coming is we've got, and I think you'd find this of interest as well, John, we've got a second generation Albertan carbon buster. Dr. Godo Stoiki is presenting next Wednesday over the lunch hour. And then the following evening on November 19th at 7 p.m. we have another Dr. Yvette Blount from Macquarie University in Australia. She'll be presenting at 7 p.m. our time, but it's actually 1 p.m. the next day in Australia. And she is presenting on telework boot the commute. So, you know, obviously the whole idea of looking at the use of technology to get at the root source of carbon production by using technology and for telecommuting. So if you have the time to tune in, John, you're absolutely welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, and I appreciate your invitation to me, Ted. It's been a pleasure, and thinking about this and preparing was great. And I'd just like to extend the offer. If anyone's interested in learning more or wants to bounce a problem off us, we're really curious to apply Ethelo to new types of challenges, particular with public-facing type of decisions. So feel free to give us a call. And you know, it's cheap to have a conversation, and we're happy to explore deeper possibilities.
Well, again, John, thanks so much for the presentation. It was fascinating. And the whole idea of this citizen engagement at internet scale, I think, is so timely and provides governments of all levels a new tool in their toolkit to deliver as better service, better public service. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and being responsive to your clients, which are your citizens. You know, how can you do that really timely and responsibly? So yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the presentation, John.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.